I used to believe that hard work and loyalty were enough to secure my future. But when the CEO fired me right before a $600 million deal, he had no idea I held something that could destroy his entire career. A patent I'd forgotten I even owned. That pink slip he handed me with such cold satisfaction? It would become his death warrant. Sometimes the best revenge isn't planned, it's simply remembering what's rightfully yours. My name is Madeline Carter, and I grew up in a town so small that our biggest tech advancement was getting dial-up internet in 2003. While other kids in our Kansas trailer park dreamed of escaping through sports or music, I found my salvation in lines of code glowing on a second-hand monitor my mother bought at a garage sale. Teaching myself programming from pirated textbooks and free online tutorials, I coded my way out of poverty, one algorithm at a time. When Vertex Core offered me a position straight out of community college, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and took a Greyhound bus to Chicago. The city's skyline looked like circuit boards reaching toward heaven, and I promised myself I'd climb every one of those towers through sheer determination. For 10 years, I gave Vertex Core everything. While my college friends were getting married, having kids, traveling the world, I was debugging code at 3 a.m., surviving on energy drinks and vending machine sandwiches. My apartment remained a glorified closet because I was rarely there anyway. Birthdays passed unnoticed, holidays meant quiet offices where I could work undisturbed. I missed my father's funeral because of a critical deployment. My sister stopped calling after I canceled our reunions 5 years straight. But I believed in the mission. Every line of code I wrote, every system I optimized, every innovation I contributed, it all felt like building something greater than myself. My colleagues became my family. The server room, my sanctuary. I rose through the ranks from junior developer to senior engineer, earning respect through results, not politics. Then came that Tuesday morning in November. I remember the email notification sound, the same cheerful ding that usually brought project updates or team lunch invitations. But this time, the sender was Bryce Hamilton, our CEO. Subject line, Organizational Restructuring. Dear Ms. Carter, after careful consideration of our strategic direction, we've determined that your services are no longer required at Vertex Core. Please surrender your access badge and company equipment to security by end of day. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance as per company policy. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. B. Hamilton. No explanation. No thank you for a decade of devotion. Not even the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation. Just 63 words that erased 10 years of my life. I sat in my cubicle, staring at the screen until the words blurred. Around me. The office hummed with its usual energy, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling. Nobody knew yet that I'd just become a ghost in the machine I'd helped build. That night, I returned to my empty apartment and finally saw it for what it was. A testament to everything I'd sacrificed for a company that discarded me like obsolete hardware. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of my team at last year's product launch. We looked so proud, so naive. I opened my laptop and began the humiliating ritual of updating my resume, knowing that at 32, I was competing against fresh graduates who'd work for half my salary. The Chicago tech scene was small, incestuous. Word would spread. The rejection emails came swiftly, some within hours of applying. Not a good fit. Position filled. Moving in a different direction. I was learning what loyalty bought you in corporate America. Absolutely nothing. 3 months after my termination, I'd perfected the art of professional invisibility. My savings dwindled faster than my confidence. I'd sold my car, downgraded to a studio in a rougher neighborhood, and learned 17 different ways to prepare ramen. My laptop screen became a mirror of rejection. Each refresh of my email brought new variations of, "We've decided to pursue other candidates." That February night, Chicago was drowning in one of its legendary snowstorms. I sat cross-legged on my threadbare carpet, scrolling through tech news to keep my skills sharp. When a headline stopped my heart, "Breaking: Vertex Core's 600mm acquisition by Orion Systems collapses over patent dispute. I read it 3 times, certain I was hallucinating from too much instant coffee and too little sleep. The article was sparse on details, typical of early breaking news, but one paragraph made my hands shake. Sources close to the negotiations indicate the deal fell through when Orion Systems discovered a critical patent underlying Vertex Core's cloud infrastructure was not owned by the company. The patent holder, identified in court documents as a former employee, has yet to comment on the situation. Former employee? My mind raced, but nothing connected. I'd never filed any patents. Or had I? The memory felt like trying to grasp smoke. I stayed up all night refreshing every tech blog, every business publication, hunting for more information. By dawn, the story had exploded across Silicon Valley's gossip networks. Vertex Core's stock price plummeted 23% at market open. Bryce Hamilton was photographed leaving the office looking haggard, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Then came the knock on my door at 9:17 a.m. I peered through the peephole to see a woman in an expensive suit, holding a leather portfolio despite the weather. Her driver waited by a black town car, engine running. "Ms. Carter, my name is Patricia Holloway from McAllister and Crane LLP. I have a letter for you regarding a matter of significant importance." My hands trembled as I accepted the envelope. The paper inside was so thick it felt like fabric. The letterhead alone probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Dear Ms. Carter, our firm represents Orion Systems in the matter of U.S. Patent No. 7654-32109, titled Intelligent Data Load Balancing System, registered under your name as sole inventor. This patent has become central to negotiations regarding the proposed acquisition of Vertex Core Technologies. We request your immediate attention to this matter, as the patent in question appears to be fundamental to systems currently in use by Vertex Core, potentially affecting hundreds of millions in revenue. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss your interest in this matter." I sank onto my couch, the letter floating from my numb fingers. Patent? My name? The words swam before my eyes like code I couldn't compile. Then, like a degraded file suddenly restored, the memory crystallized. 6 years ago, a different time, a different Vertex Core. I was just a mid-level developer then, head down, coding through another 18-hour day. The CTO was Gareth Doyle, brilliant, paranoid, and the only executive who knew everyone's name, even the night cleaning staff. I'd developed a load balancing algorithm during a particularly brutal crunch period. It was elegant, efficient, and solved a problem that had plagued our infrastructure for months. I'd presented it at our weekly tech review, expecting maybe a bonus or a pat on the back. Instead, Gareth had pulled me aside after the meeting. I still remembered the weight of his hand on my shoulder, the way he glanced around before speaking. "File this as a patent, under your name only. But it's company work. Trust me. Madeline. File it personally. The paperwork's in your desk. I've already had legal prepare it, off the books. Just sign and submit." I thought he was being paranoid. Gareth saw conspiracies in compiler updates, but I trusted him. Signed the papers, paid the filing fee from my own credit card, and promptly forgot about it. 3 months later, Gareth was forced out in what they called a strategic realignment. I'd mourned his departure, but moved on. The patent filing buried under years of sprints and deployments. Now, staring at the letter, I understood his paranoia had been prophecy. I grabbed my phone and searched the USPTO database with shaking fingers. There it was. Patent number Ds. 7654-32109, issued to Madeline Carter, filed 6 years ago. Status: active. And according to the legal letter, it was the cornerstone of Vertex Core's entire cloud infrastructure, the innovation they'd built their empire on. The same empire that had discarded me like garbage. For the first time in 3 months, I smiled. The Colorado number had been disconnected twice before Gareth finally answered on my seventh attempt. 3 days after the letter arrived. His voice sounded rougher, aged by distance and whatever demons had chased him from Chicago. Madeline, I've been expecting your call. Gareth, what the hell? Not over the phone. If you're calling about what I think you're calling about, we need to meet. There's a diner off I-80, exit 126, halfway between us. Mel's truck stop? Thursday, 2 p.m. The line went dead. Classic Gareth, paranoid even in exile. I borrowed money I didn't have for a rental car and drove 6 hours through frozen farmland, replaying every interaction from 6 years ago. The details emerged like hidden code comments, suddenly visible and vital. Mel's truck stop was exactly what you'd expect. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that could strip paint, and truckers who minded their own business. Gareth sat in the back corner, baseball cap pulled low. He'd lost weight, gained gray hair, but his eyes remained sharp as debugged code. You look like hell, he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. Unemployment isn't great for the complexion. Now talk. He laughed, a bitter sound. Straight to the point. That's what I always liked about you. Madeline. You see the code, not the comments. The patent was my insurance policy, one I gifted to you. He leaned back, scanning the diner with habitual paranoia. I knew Bryce was planning to push me out. Man's got the ethics of a ransomware developer. But I also knew the load balancing system you created would become critical infrastructure. So I documented everything, every meeting where Bryce claimed credit, every email where leadership dismissed your work, every time they promised to revisit compensation later. Why didn't you file it yourself? Because they would have found a way to claim it. Employment contracts, IP agreements, legal gymnastics. But you? You were junior enough to fly under radar, talented enough to deserve it. I made sure the filing was airtight, personal time, personal equipment, predating any formal assignment of the project. My coffee grew cold as he explained the chess game he'd been playing, how he'd suspected Bryce was positioning Vertex Core for acquisition even then, how he'd seen other engineers' innovations absorbed, repackaged, sold off, how he'd decided at least one person should benefit from their own brilliance. After they forced me out, I waited, watched. When I heard about the Orion acquisition, I knew the patent would surface in due diligence. Tech companies spending that much money check everything, every line of code, every legal claim, every potential landmine. So you set up a time bomb. I gave you a shield. What you do with it is your choice. He slid a business card across the table. Jillian Matthews, best IP lawyer in the business. She already knows you'll be calling. And Madeline? His expression softened. Don't let guilt make you stupid. Bryce threw you away without a second thought. The fact that you're holding his $600 million baby hostage, that's not revenge, that's justice. The drive back to Chicago felt like rewinding 6 years of naivety. Every mile, another memory clicked into place. How Bryce had announced his breakthrough in cloud efficiency at the company All Hands. How my name had been mysteriously absent from the technical papers. How I'd been too grateful for the job, too eager to belong, to fight for credit. That night, I called Jillian Matthews. Her voice was warm honey over steel blades. Ms. Carter, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Gareth filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear your version, every detail, every document, every doubt. We talked for 3 hours. She dissected my employment history with surgical precision, identifying every moment where Vertex Core had potentially violated labor laws, IP agreements, or basic human decency. Here's the situation, she finally said. Your patent is valid, properly filed, and absolutely essential to their infrastructure. Vertex Core built their entire cloud architecture on your innovation without compensation or acknowledgement. Now they're trying to sell something they don't fully own. Orion Systems won't touch the deal without clear ownership. Bryce Hamilton is currently experiencing what we in the legal profession call extreme anal clenching. So what happens now? Now you decide how much justice tastes like. We can negotiate a licensing deal that makes you wealthy. We can demand retroactive compensation that makes you very wealthy. Or, she paused, and I could hear her smile through the phone. We can make Bryce Hamilton understand that some mistakes have permanent consequences. I stared out my window at Chicago's glittering skyline, the same view that had once promised me everything. Let's explore option 3. The call came at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after my conversation with Jillian. I'd learned to recognize Bryce Hamilton's number from the 17 previous attempts I'd declined. This time, bolstered by coffee and Jillian's coaching, I answered, "Madeline, thank God, listen, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." His voice had lost its corporate polish. Underneath the forced warmth, I heard something delicious: desperation. "Hello, Bryce. We need to talk, face to face. I can send a car." "No." "Then I'll come to you. Name the place. This whole patent situation, it's just a big confusion. I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone." I let silence stretch between us like a tightening noose. In the background, I heard muffled voices, board members, lawyers, or maybe just the sound of an empire creaking under pressure. "Madeline, you still there?" "I'm here, just wondering why you're calling. After all, my services are no longer required at Vertex Core." Your words, not mine. That was, "Look, restructuring is complex. Decisions were made that perhaps weren't fully thought through. We've always valued your contributions." "Which contributions specifically?" I kept my voice pleasant, imagining Jillian's approving nod. "The load balancing system you've been selling as Vertex Core's proprietary innovation? The one that's generated approximately $200 million in revenue over the past 5 years? That contribution?" The silence shifted, gained weight. When he spoke again, the mask had slipped further. "What do you want?" "Goodbye, Bryce." I hung up and immediately called Jillian. "He's cracking." "Beautiful. Time for phase 2. The next morning, Vertex Core's legal team launched their assault. The cease and desist letter arrived by courier, thick with threats and thin on substance. They claimed I'd developed the patent using company resources during company time, making it company property. They demanded I transfer all rights immediately or face legal action for theft of intellectual property. Jillian laughed so hard she actually snorted. "They're desperate. This is tissue paper masquerading as legal doctrine. Forward it to me. I'll have fun with the response." Her reply was a masterpiece of legal savagery wrapped in professional courtesy. She systematically destroyed each claim, cited precedents that made their position untenable, and concluded with a counter-warning about potential defamation. The last paragraph was particularly elegant. Furthermore, any continued harassment of Ms. Carter will be construed as an attempt to intimidate a whistleblower who possesses knowledge of potentially fraudulent representations made to investors regarding IP ownership. We trust Vertex Core will proceed with appropriate caution. The threat worked. The nasty letters stopped, replaced by increasingly panicked overtures. Bryce tried everything: mutual friends reaching out, former colleagues just checking in, even a clumsy attempt through my LinkedIn with a recruiter offering me a consulting opportunity at 3 times my old salary. Meanwhile, Orion Systems made their move. Their approach was refreshingly direct. No threats, no manipulation, just business. "Mrs. Carter," their chief legal counsel said during our first call, "we're prepared to negotiate a licensing agreement for your patent. Our interest in Vertex Core is contingent on clean IP ownership. Without your cooperation, there's no deal." "I understand. However, I'm not interested in a standard licensing arrangement." "What did you have in mind?" Jillian had prepared me for this moment. "Exclusive license to Orion Systems, non-transferable, with a specific exclusion preventing any current Vertex Core executive from benefiting from the technology post-acquisition." The lawyer paused. "That's unusual. You realize this would effectively require Vertex Core to remove certain executives from any role involving the patented technology?" "I'm aware." "Including the CEO?" especially the CEO. Another pause. I'll need to discuss this with our board. But off the record, I think they'll find your terms acceptable. Bryce's calls increased to hourly. I didn't answer, but I saved every voicemail. They charted a fascinating psychological journey, from anger to bargaining to something approaching grief. Madeline, please. The board is breathing down my neck. This is bigger than just you and me. Think of the employees. I'll give you anything. Name your price. Stock options, cash, a seat on the board. You're destroying everything I built. The last one made me laugh out loud in my empty apartment. Everything he built? With my code, my innovation, my sleepless nights? Jillian called that evening with an update. Orion's board approved your terms. They're drafting the agreement now. There's just one thing. Bryce knows it's over. He's requested a final meeting. Face to face. He says he wants to make things right. I stared at the photo still sitting on my counter. The team at product launch. Bryce's arm around my shoulders, his smile already counting the millions my work would generate. Set it up, but it happens on my terms. The meeting was set for the following Monday at Orion Systems' Chicago headquarters, neutral ground that sent a clear message. I arrived early, wearing the only designer suit I'd ever owned, purchased 3 years ago for a conference where I'd presented Bryce's vision while he took credit from the audience. Jillian met me in the marble lobby, impeccable as always. Ready for this? I've been ready since the day he fired me via email. Good. Remember, you hold all the cards. Let him show his hand first. The conference room was on the 47th floor, its windows offering a view of Vertex Core's building 6 blocks away. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Orion's legal team was already seated, 5 lawyers who probably billed more per hour than I'd made in a month. They nodded respectfully as we entered. I was no longer the discarded engineer. I was the kingmaker. Bryce arrived 15 minutes late, a power play that might have worked when he held power. His entourage included Vertex Core's chief counsel, 2 board members, and enough assistants to form a small army. But none of that masked the hollow look in his eyes or the way his hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his chair. Madeline. He attempted his trademark smile, the one that graced TechCrunch headlines. You look well. Unemployment suits me. The smile flickered. About that, shall we begin? Orion's lead counsel interrupted smoothly. We're here to discuss the terms of Ms. Carter's patent licensing agreement. Bryce leaned forward, abandoning pretense. Madeline, what happened between us? It was business, nothing personal. You understand that, right? The tech industry is brutal. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. Like taking credit for other people's work? His jaw tightened. I made you a senior engineer. I gave you opportunities. You gave me nothing I didn't earn 10 times over. And when it came time to cash in on the empire built on my innovation, you discarded me like deprecated code. That's not... He stopped, visibly collecting himself. What will it take to make this right? I slid a folder across the table. Jillian had helped me prepare it. A comprehensive breakdown of every revenue stream tied to my patent. Every presentation where Bryce had claimed sole credit. Every bonus he'd received while I worked 18-hour days. 5 years of retroactive compensation based on actual revenue generated. Public acknowledgement of my role in developing the technology. And your resignation from any position that would give you access to or benefit from my patent. The room erupted. Board members shouted over each other. Lawyers frantically flipped through documents. Bryce's face cycled through colors I didn't know humans could achieve. When the chaos settled, he spoke through gritted teeth. You're asking me to destroy my own career. No, I'm asking you to experience the consequences of your choices. The same way I experienced mine when you fired me without cause or consideration. The board will never. The board will do exactly that. One of the board members interrupted. She was older, with silver hair and eyes like frozen mercury. Mr. Hamilton, Your failure to secure proper IP ownership has cost this company a $600 million acquisition. Your attempts to intimidate Ms. Carter have exposed us to potential litigation. Your only value to Vertex Core was your supposed technical vision, which we now know was stolen. Bryce turned to her, shock replacing anger. Margaret, you can't be serious. I'm deadly serious. Ms. Carter's terms are more than fair. Accept them, or we'll find someone who will. The transformation was complete. The man who'd ruled through fear and manipulation sat deflated, understanding finally dawning. He looked at me, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time. You planned this. No. Bryce. You planned this the day you decided I was expendable. I'm just better at execution than you gave me credit for. Orion's counsel produced the licensing agreement, 23 pages of legalese that boiled down to simple justice. I would retain ownership of my patent, license it exclusively to Orion Systems, and receive both retroactive and ongoing compensation. Vertex Core could be acquired, but Bryce Hamilton would never touch my technology again. As he signed, each signature a nail in his professional coffin, I thought about the nights I'd spent crying in my apartment, wondering what I'd done wrong. The answer was nothing. I'd done nothing wrong except trust someone who saw people as resources to be exploited and discarded. We're done here, Bryce said, standing abruptly. His entourage scrambled to follow. At the door, he turned back. I hope you're satisfied. I'm not satisfied, Bryce. Satisfied would mean the last 3 months never happened. This is just business. Nothing personal. The door closed with a decisive click, leaving me in a room full of lawyers and the ruins of someone else's empire. The execution was swift and surgical. Within 24 hours of our meeting, Vertex Core's board convened an emergency session. By market close, Bryce Hamilton was no longer CEO. The press release used sanitized corporate speak, pursuing other opportunities. Grateful for his years of service, confident in the company's direction, but Silicon Valley knew how to read between the lines. My phone became a lightning rod for notifications. Former colleagues who hadn't returned my calls during unemployment suddenly remembered my number. Tech reporters begged for exclusive interviews. Recruiters circled like well-dressed vultures, sensing fresh carrion in the water. I ignored them all, except for one text from Sarah, a junior developer I'd mentored. Holy shit, Madeline, you're my hero. The financial press had a field day. CEO ousted in patent scandal. How one engineer's innovation toppled a tech titan. 600 milliliters deal salvaged after leadership shakeup. My favorite was from a Valley gossip blog. Fired engineer pulls Uno reverse card, destroys CEO. But the real satisfaction came from watching Bryce's systematic erasure from the tech landscape. His keynote at CloudCon was quietly canceled. The venture capital firm where he sat on the board announced his departure, to focus on personal matters. His verified Twitter account went private after the ratios became astronomical. Jillian called me the morning after, barely containing her glee. Bryce's lawyer reached out. He wants to know if you'd consider modifying the non-involvement clause for a consultancy role at a startup. What did you tell him? That my client's position remains unchanged. Also, that irony isn't a valid legal argument. Orion Systems moved fast. With Bryce gone and the patent secured, the acquisition proceeded at breakneck speed. They offered me the role of Director of IP Strategy, a position created specifically to ensure they'd never repeat Vertex Core's mistakes. The salary was 3 times what I'd made as a senior engineer, with equity that would vest into something substantial. But first, I had one more meeting to attend. The old Vertex Core team, my team, had organized a dinner at a steakhouse downtown. Walking in felt like entering a parallel universe where the last 6 months had been a nightmare. They stood and applauded when I arrived, some with tears in their eyes. We didn't know. Marcus, my old team lead, said quietly. About the patent, about what Bryce did. If we had, you'd have been fired too. I finished. I know. It's not your fault. The stories poured out over wine and whiskey. How Bryce had claimed my load balancing system was based on his theoretical framework. How he'd blocked promotions for anyone who questioned the narrative. How the culture had grown increasingly toxic as the acquisition talks intensified. He brought in consultants last month, Amy from QA told me. Said we needed to optimize human resources. We all knew layoffs were coming after the deal closed. Not anymore, I said, raising my glass. Orion's keeping everyone, well, everyone except executive leadership. The cheer that went up probably violated several noise ordinances. As the evening wound down, Marcus pulled me aside. I kept something for you. He handed me a printed email from 4 years ago, my original proposal for the load balancing system. Timestamp clearly visible. Thought you might want this for your records, or maybe to frame. I hugged him. This proof of what I'd always known but could never demonstrate. Thank you. Thank you, he corrected, for showing us that the bastards don't always win. That night, I stood on my tiny balcony, looking out at Chicago's glittering skyline. Somewhere in those lights, Bryce Hamilton was probably packing his office, deleting contacts, figuring out how to spin his fall from grace. His investors were probably calculating losses, his board members distancing themselves, his carefully cultivated network evaporating like morning mist. Jillian had sent me screenshots from LinkedIn. He'd already updated his profile to Tech Advisor and Angel Investor. The comments section was brutal. Someone had even created a meme, his corporate headshot with the caption, "It hurt itself in its confusion." My phone buzzed. A voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I played it. Madeline, it's Gareth. Heard the news. Told you that patent was a shield. But damn, you turned it into a sword. Proud of you, kid. Remember, they only win if we let them. Don't let your guard down just because this war's over. There's always another Bryce waiting in the wings. Stay sharp. I saved the message, a reminder that victory was temporary in Silicon Valley's Game of Thrones. But for tonight, I'd won. The girl from Kansas who'd learned to code on a garage sale computer had brought down a CEO who thought people were disposable. Tomorrow, I'd start at Orion Systems, building something new on foundations of integrity instead of exploitation. But tonight I'd savor the taste of justice served at exactly the right temperature, cold as a pink slip delivered by email. The news broke on a gray Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I'd started at Orion Systems. I was reviewing integration plans when my assistant knocked. Yes, I had an assistant now, something that still felt surreal. Ms. Carter, you'll want to see this. She handed me a tablet displaying the Wall Street Journal's tech section. The headline made me set down my coffee. Former Vertex Core CEO Bryce Hamilton under SEC investigation for fraudulent IP claims. The article was thorough, devastating. Investigators had uncovered a pattern of Bryce claiming ownership of innovations developed by employees, inflating valuations based on technology Vertex Core didn't actually own. My patent had been the thread that, once pulled, unraveled years of deception. My phone buzzed. A text from Jillian. Saw the news. Turns out you weren't his only victim, just the one who fought back. By lunch, 3 more former Vertex Core engineers had come forward with similar stories. The SEC investigation expanded. Bryce's remaining investors pulled out. His tech advisor profile disappeared from LinkedIn, replaced by radio silence. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, sitting in my corner office with actual windows overlooking Lake Michigan, I felt oddly peaceful. The anger that had fueled me through unemployment and legal battles had transformed into something else: purpose. That afternoon, I called an all-hands meeting with my team at Orion. We're implementing a new policy, I announced. Every innovation, every line of code, every breakthrough, proper attribution. Your names on your work, your contributions recognized. We're building a culture where brilliance isn't stolen, it's celebrated. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. These weren't corporate drones performing enthusiasm for executives. These were engineers who understood what it meant to have their work respected. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at TechCon, the same conference where Bryce had once presented my work as his own. Standing at the podium, looking out at 1,000 faces, I didn't talk about revenge or justice. I talked about integrity and innovation, about building companies that valued creators, not just C-suites. The greatest inefficiency in tech isn't bad code, I said. It's brilliant minds going uncredited, innovations stolen by those who confuse leadership with ownership. We can build better systems, not just in our software, but in our culture. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached, maybe 22, clutching a resume, wearing the hungry look I recognized from mirrors a decade ago. Ms. Carter, I'm starting as a junior developer next month. Any advice? I thought about all the things I could say. Work hard, trust carefully, document everything. Instead, I smiled and handed her my business card. File your patents in your own name. And never, ever let anyone convince you that your brilliance belongs to them by default. Her eyes widened. She clutched the card like a talisman and disappeared into the crowd. Later that evening, I received one final communication about Bryce Hamilton, his lawyer, reaching out to Jillian, asking if I'd be willing to provide a character reference for his sentencing hearing. The SEC had filed formal charges. Criminal proceedings were moving forward. I had Jillian send a one-word response. No. Some bridges deserve to stay burned. Today, I still work at Orion Systems. Now, as Chief Innovation Officer, we've acquired 6 more companies, each time ensuring creators retain rights to their creations. My patent continues generating revenue, properly attributed, fairly compensated. Bryce Hamilton? Last I heard, he was teaching entrepreneurship ethics at a community college in Nebraska. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, but this isn't really a story about revenge. It's about remembering your worth when someone tries to convince you otherwise. It's about understanding that loyalty to a company that sees you as disposable is misplaced faith. It's about the power of keeping receipts, literal and metaphorical. Every morning, I walk past a framed email in my office, the one Marcus saved, proving the load balancing system was mine. Below it hangs my patent certificate, not trophies of war, but reminders. Document your brilliance, own your innovations, and never let anyone else write your story. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better from the ashes they left behind. It's becoming successful enough that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your biography. The catalyst that transformed a naive engineer into a leader who changes how the game is played. My name is Madeline Carter. I was fired by a CEO who thought I was nobody. He was wrong. And somewhere in Chicago, in a conference room on the 47th floor, my code still runs. Brilliant, efficient, and properly attributed, just as it always should have been. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I love connecting with listeners around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced betrayal in the workplace? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.